Okay, so have you ever looked at your weather app and seen that little number? You know, the AQI.
Well, the air quality index.
Right, the AQI.
Yeah.
That's what we're diving into today.
I love it.
Because you've probably seen it, on the news or, like I said, on your weather app. It makes you think, should I go for a run today? Or maybe we should stay inside.
Right.
But we're going beyond that number today.
I love it.
We're going to really unpack what it means for you, for your health, and how it can actually give you some power to make healthier choices.
Absolutely. And I think that's the fascinating thing about the AQI.
Yeah.
It's really this bridge between, all this complicated science and data and then your everyday life.
Right.
So it's basically a snapshot of how clean or polluted the air is right now, right where you are, and translating it into a value that anyone can understand.
So it's not just like, oh, the air feels yucky today. It's
Right.
like, no, this is what's actually in the air.
Exactly.
And this is how it could be affecting me.
Yeah, and that's why it's important to understand the AQI scale, which ranges from 0 to 500.
Okay.
Lower numbers mean cleaner air, and the whole point is to raise awareness about air pollution.
To kind of give us that heads up, hey, this is something you need to be thinking about.
Absolutely, and to make it even more clear, the AQI is broken down into 6 categories,
Okay.
ranging from good air quality, where you're pretty much in the clear, to hazardous, where everyone should avoid being outside.
Got it.
And of course, there are stages in between where things get a bit more concerning, especially for sensitive groups.
Right. So kind of like a sliding scale
Definitely.
of concern.
Yeah.
Now, you mentioned something earlier that was really interesting.
Yeah.
You said that the AQI isn't like an average of all the pollutants in the air.
Right.
It's based on the highest level of a single pollutant.
Yeah.
So even if, 4 out of 5 pollutants are looking good,
Right.
that one bad one can throw the whole score off.
It's like the weakest link, right?
Totally. The weakest link.
Yeah. Yeah. For example, even if the ozone and carbon monoxide levels are pretty low, if fine particulate matter spikes, boom, that's what's going to drive the AQI for the day.
It's all about identifying the biggest threat to public health.
That's right.
So then let's talk about those pollutants.
Yeah.
What are they? What are we dealing with here?
So the AQI measures 6 key pollutants. We've got particulate matter, ozone, carbon monoxide, sulfur dioxide, nitrogen dioxide, and lead.
Lead.
Yeah. Though it's much less of an issue now, lead used to be a big factor in AQI calculations.
Wow, it really makes you think about how this whole system has evolved.
It really does.
Right, like leaded gasoline, we don't even think about that anymore.
Right.
But it was a huge problem.
Absolutely.
And this system has adapted to reflect that.
It's fascinating to see how things change.
Okay, so these pollutants, they're not all created equal.
Right.
They affect us in different ways.
Exactly. Each one has its own unique impact on our health.
Okay.
Take particulate matter, specifically PM 2.5, for instance.
Yeah.
Yep. These are incredibly tiny particles, you see.
Tiny, like how tiny are we talking here? Smaller than a dust mote.
Much smaller. Think 30 times smaller than a human hair.
Wow. 30 times smaller than a human hair.
That's right.
That is tiny.
And that's what makes them so dangerous. They can bypass our body's natural defenses and get deep into our lungs and even into the bloodstream.
So that's leading to what? Respiratory problems, heart problems?
All the above.
Wow. Okay.
So yeah, PM 2.5 is a big one.
Okay, so then there's ozone.
Right.
And I know ozone is good way up high.
Up in the stratosphere.
Right, but down here where we are, it's not so friendly.
Not at all.
Right. Ground level ozone, which is often part of smog, can really irritate the respiratory system, making it hard to breathe, especially if you have asthma.
Okay. And then, of course, we have the infamous carbon monoxide.
The silent killer.
The silent killer. And that's the one that messes with our blood, right?
Yeah, it binds to hemoglobin in our red blood cells.
Right. Which reduces their ability to carry oxygen throughout the body.
So it basically suffocates us from the inside out.
Pretty much.
Not good.
Not good at all.
And that's why we have carbon monoxide detectors in our home.
Exactly. It can be really dangerous, especially in enclosed spaces.
Okay. And then we've got sulfur dioxide and nitrogen dioxide.
Those are the other big ones.
And those are both respiratory irritants, right?
Yep. They can trigger asthma attacks, cause coughing, and make it hard to breathe.
Yeah, not pleasant.
Not at all.
And you already mentioned lead. And even though it's less common now, it's still really dangerous, especially for kids.
Especially for kids, yeah.
Right. It can have long-term effects on their development.
Absolutely.
So these are some serious pollutants we're talking about here.
They are.
And they don't just appear out of thin air, right? They come from somewhere.
They do. They have sources.
Right. So what are we talking about here?
Well, a lot of human activity is involved, you know.
Yep.
Vehicle emissions are a big one.
Right. Cars and trucks and all that.
Exactly, and industrial activity,
Factories, power plants.
all of that. And then there are wildfires, which are becoming more and more of a concern.
Yeah, those are huge.
They release a ton of smoke and particulate matter into the air.
Right. And then even everyday things like construction dust or burning fossil fuels, all of that contributes.
It all adds up.
So basically, our modern way of life is kind of messing with the air we breathe.
To a certain extent, yeah.
Okay, so we know where these pollutants are coming from. We know they're bad for us. But how do we get that AQI number? It's not just like somebody steps outside, takes a deep breath, and says, well, this feels like a 150 today, right?
No, not quite.
There has to be more to it than
There's a lot of science and data behind it.
Okay, so break it down for us.
Well, it all starts with the EPA, the Environmental Protection Agency.
Okay, they're the ones who set the standards. Yeah.
Exactly. They set the air quality standards, and they're also the ones gathering all the data.
Good.
They have monitoring stations all across the country.
Wow, so they're constantly collecting information about what's in the air?
They are.
That's impressive.
It's a huge undertaking, and then they use specific formulas to convert the pollutant concentrations into that single AQI value we see.
So they're doing the heavy lifting, collecting the data, crunching the numbers, and then translating it into something we can actually understand.
Exactly, making it accessible to everyone.
And what I find even more remarkable is that they update the AQI frequently.
Oh, yeah, very frequently.
Like, how often are we talking?
Usually hourly.
Hourly. I had no idea it was that often.
Yeah, air quality changes constantly. It's very dynamic.
So it's not enough to just check it once in the morning and assume it's going to stay that way all day.
Not at all. You got to stay updated.
Wow, okay, so it's personalized, it's dynamic, but you also mentioned earlier that it's not just pollution sources that affect the AQI.
Right.
Weather plays a role, too.
Weather plays a huge role.
Okay, so explain that to me.
Well, weather conditions have a big impact on how pollutants are transported and concentrated in the atmosphere.
Okay.
For example, high temperatures can speed up the formation of ground-level ozone.
Oh, so those beautiful sunny days might not be as healthy as they seem.
Not always, especially in areas prone to smog.
Right, that makes sense.
And then there's wind.
Wind.
Yeah, a strong breeze can help disperse pollutants.
So it blows the bad stuff away.
Exactly. But if the air is stagnant, pollutants can build up.
Okay, so wind is kind of like a giant fan for the atmosphere.
I like that analogy.
Right, either blowing the bad stuff away or letting it sit and stew.
Exactly.
Okay, and then you mentioned something called a temperature inversion.
Ah, yes, temperature inversions.
That sounds a little ominous.
They can be.
What happens there?
Well, a temperature inversion happens when a layer of warm air gets trapped above a layer of cold air.
Okay.
And that traps pollutants close to the ground.
Oh, no. So instead of rising and dispersing, the pollutants are stuck down here with us.
Yep, that's exactly what happens.
That sounds kind of terrifying.
It can be, especially in areas surrounded by mountains or valleys where air circulation is already limited.
Right, so it's like putting a lid on the atmosphere.
Exactly.
And then all the bad stuff just gets trapped underneath.
That's a good way to visualize it.
And speaking of things that can really impact air quality over a large area, what about wildfires?
Wildfires are a huge concern when it comes to air quality.
Yeah, we've been seeing a lot more of those lately.
We have, and they release enormous amounts of smoke and particulate matter.
Right, and that can travel for miles and miles.
Thousands of miles sometimes.
Yeah, I remember a few years back when we had those massive wildfires out west.
Oh, yeah.
And even here on the East Coast, we could see the haze and smell the smoke in the air.
It was incredible, wasn't it?
Yeah, it really drove home how interconnected our air quality is.
It really did.
What happens in one place can affect us all.
Absolutely.
Okay, so we've established that the AQI is personalized information. It's telling us about the air quality specifically where we are. But I think what our listeners really want to know is, what does it actually mean for our daily lives?
That's the key question.
Right. What's the difference between seeing AQI of 100 versus 300? How should that change our behavior?
I'm glad you asked.
Yeah, let's break that down.
Let's imagine two scenarios.
Okay.
One where the AQI is 100,
Yep.
which falls into the moderate category,
Good.
and another where it's 300, which is considered hazardous.
Okay, so I'm picturing myself checking my weather app.
All right.
What am I in for with each of those readings?
Well, at an AQI of 100, most people won't experience any noticeable health effects.
Okay.
But those with sensitivities like asthma or heart conditions might start to feel some minor impacts.
Okay.
So it's a bit of a yellow flag. It's signed to be a little more cautious.
Right. Maybe take it easy on that run, shorten your time outdoors.
Exactly.
Okay, but then at 300, that's a whole different story.
Oh yeah, 300 is a red flag for
A
everyone.
red flag.
The air quality is so poor that it poses a serious health risk regardless of your health status.
Yikes. That sounds pretty scary.
Yes.
So what should people do if the AQI hits 300?
Stay inside.
Stay inside.
As much as possible, yes.
Okay.
Limit your time outdoors, avoid strenuous activity, and seriously consider just staying indoors altogether.
Wow. Okay.
Especially if you have young children, elderly family members, or are in a sensitive group yourself.
So basically, treat it like a snow day, but for bad air.
That's a good way to put it.
Stay inside, hunker down, and wait for the all clear.
Exactly.
The key takeaway here is that the AQI isn't just a number.
It's not.
It's information that can help us make informed decisions about our health.
That's what it's all about.
Right, like having a superpower.
I like that.
The ability to see the invisible and make choices to protect ourselves.
And the people we care about.
Exactly. So now that we have this awareness, how can our listeners use it in their everyday lives?
That's the good question.
Right, because it's great to know what the AQI is, but if we don't know how to use it, it's not very helpful.
Exactly.
So give us some practical tips.
Well, now that you're armed with this awareness, think about how you can incorporate the AQI into your daily routine.
Okay.
For example, maybe check the AQI before you head out for your morning run.
A good idea.
Or if you're planning to take your kids to the park, choose a park that's in an area with better air quality.
So it's about being aware and making informed choices.
Precisely.
And if you're planning a trip, especially to a region known for air quality issues,
Right.
you might want to factor the AQI into your itinerary.
Absolutely.
Maybe even adjust your travel dates to coincide with periods of better air quality.
That's a great point.
Yeah, I never thought about planning a trip around AQI before.
It can make a big difference, especially if you have any sensitivities.
Right, and for those who are particularly vulnerable to air pollution,
Yeah.
investing in a good air purifier for your home can be a lifesaver.
Absolutely. It can create a safe haven.
Right, a clean air bubble.
Exactly.
And even simple things like carpooling or using public transportation on days with high AQI can help.
Every little bit counts.
Right, all adds up.
It really does.
So what I'm hearing is that there are a lot of ways to use this knowledge to our advantage.
There are.
It's not just about being aware of the problem.
Right.
It's about taking action to protect ourselves.
Exactly. It's about empowerment.
Empowerment. I love that.
Taking control of your health in a world where you can't always control the air you breathe.
That's a great way to put it.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into AQI,
Yeah.
what are the key takeaways you want our listeners to walk away with today?
Well, I think the most important thing to remember is that AQI is personalized information.
It is.
It's telling you about the air quality specifically where you are.
Right, not just some general citywide average.
Exactly. It's about what's happening right outside your door.
Exactly.
And the second takeaway is that AQI is dynamic.
Very dynamic.
It changes constantly throughout the day.
As weather patterns shift, as pollution sources fluctuate, all sorts of factors come into play.
So checking it once in the morning isn't enough.
Nope.
We need to stay updated throughout the day.
Especially if you're planning to be outdoors or if you have sensitivities.
Right. That's a really good point.
And finally, and perhaps most importantly, AQI is a tool for action.
Yeah.
It's not about passively observing the numbers.
Right.
It's about using that information to make informed decisions that protect your health and the health of those around you.
So knowledge is power.
But only if we use it.
But only if we use it. I love that.
Now that we understand what AQI is, how it's calculated, and why it matters,
Yeah.
what can our listeners actually do with this knowledge?
That's the question, isn't it? Now that we're armed with this awareness, what are the next steps?
Well, I challenge you to incorporate it into your daily life.
Okay.
Small changes can make a big difference.
Like what? Give us some examples.
Well, maybe check the AQI before you head out for a bike ride.
Good one.
Or if you're planning a family picnic, consider choosing a park with better air quality.
Right. So it's about being mindful and making those little adjustments. And if you or someone in your family has respiratory issues,
Right.
think about adjusting your outdoor activities on days when the AQI is high.
Absolutely.
Maybe opt for an indoor workout or choose a less strenuous activity.
Good idea.
And you mentioned air purifiers earlier. Those can be a real game changer for people who are really sensitive to air pollution.
Oh, yeah. They can make a world of difference.
Right. They create a clean air bubble in your home.
Exactly.
And even choosing to carpool or use public transportation on days with high AQI can help.
It all adds up.
It really does.
Every little bit makes a difference.
So we have the power to make a difference, both for ourselves and for the environment.
We do.
It's a win-win.
It is.
Well, I don't know about you, but I'm feeling a lot more empowered after this deep dive.
Me too.
It's amazing how much we can learn from one little number.
It is, and it's so important.
It really is, and this conversation has definitely made me more aware of the air I'm breathing.
Me too. It makes you think
It really does.
about all that's going on around us that we don't even see.
Right, the invisible world of air quality.
Exactly.
Well, sadly, we're out of time for today.
No.
But I hope our listeners are walking away with a newfound appreciation for the AQI and how it can help them live healthier lives.
I hope so too.
Remember, knowledge is power. And with this knowledge, you can make informed choices to breathe a little easier.
Well said.
Thanks for joining us for this deep dive into AQI.
It was my pleasure.
Until next time, stay curious and breathe well.
Bye, everyone. It really is amazing all the work that goes into calculating this number
Right.
that we just glance at on our phones.
Exactly. So much data and science behind it.
So the EPA, they gather data from all these monitoring stations, right?
Across the country.
Yeah, all over the place. And then they use formulas to convert those pollutant concentrations into that AQI value.
So they're like the masterminds behind the scenes,
Pretty much.
figuring it all out for us.
They're doing the heavy lifting, for sure.
And what's even more impressive is how often they update this information.
Oh, yeah, it's not a static thing, you know?
Right, because I was thinking, you check it in the morning, you're good to go.
Right.
But it's not like that.
Not at all. Air quality can change so quickly.
So how often are we talking about?
Usually hourly.
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 Wow.
So that number you see on your app, it's a snapshot of that very moment.
It's like a live feed
Exactly.
of what's in the air.
That's a great way to put it.
Okay, so we've talked about the pollutants, the sources, and the calculations.
Yeah.
But you mentioned earlier that weather also plays a role in AQI.
Oh, weather is a huge factor.
Okay, so how does that work?
Well, think about it. Weather conditions influence how pollutants move around in the atmosphere.
Okay.
Like temperature, for example.
Okay.
High temperatures can actually speed up the formation of ground-level ozone.
Oh, so those hot, sunny days, not always the best for air quality.
Not necessarily, especially if you're in an area that's prone to smog.
Right, because ozone is a key component of smog.
Exactly.
Okay, so what about wind?
Wind is interesting. A strong breeze can help disperse pollutants.
So it's like nature's air purifier.
Exactly. It blows the bad stuff away.
But if the air is stagnant,
If there's no wind,
then those pollutants just hang out.
they just sit there and build up.
Okay, and then you also mentioned something called a temperature inversion.
Ah, yes. Temperature inversions. Those can be tricky.
What happens there?
Well, basically, you get a layer of warm air sitting on top of a layer of cold air.
Okay.
And that warm air acts like a lid.
A lid.
Yeah, it traps the pollutants close to the ground.
Oh, so instead of rising and dispersing, they're stuck down here with us.
Exactly. It's like a dome of bad air.
That sounds really unhealthy.
It can be, especially in areas with limited air circulation like valleys or areas surrounded by mountains.
Right, because the pollutants have nowhere to go. They
Exactly.
just get stuck.
And then you have things like wildfires.
Oh yeah, wildfires, those are huge.
They release a ton of smoke and particulate matter into the atmosphere.
Right, and that can affect air quality for miles around.
Hundreds, even thousands of miles sometimes.
Yeah, I remember a few years ago we had those massive wildfires out west. And even here on the East Coast, we could see the haze and smell the smoke in the air.
It's amazing how far those pollutants can travel.
It really is. It shows how interconnected our air quality is.
Absolutely.
So we've talked about all these factors that affect AQI.
Right, the pollutants, the sources, the weather patterns.
But ultimately, what our listeners really want to know is, what does this number mean for them?
I agree. That's the crucial question.
Right, what's the difference between an AQI of 100 and an AQI of 300? How should we adjust our behavior based on that number?
That's what we're going to get into right after the break.
Okay, so let's get back to those two scenarios you mentioned before the break.
Right. AQI 100 versus AQI 300.
Okay, so I'm looking at my weather app, and I see an AQI of 100. What does that mean for me?
Well, at 100, which is considered moderate,
The light.
most people won't really experience any noticeable health effects.
Okay.
But if you have any sensitivities, like asthma or heart conditions,
Right.
you might start to feel some minor impacts.
Okay, so it's like a yellow flag?
Yeah, yellow flag, proceed with caution.
Right, maybe take it a little easier, shorten your outdoor workout, that kind of thing.
Exactly.
Okay, but what about when that number jumps up to 300?
300 is a whole different ballgame.
300, that's hazardous.
Hazardous. That's a red flag for everyone.
Red flag for everyone.
At that level, the air quality is so poor that it poses a serious health risk, regardless of your health status.
So what's the advice then?
Stay inside.
Stay inside, period.
As much as possible, yes.
Wow. Okay.
Limit your time outdoors, avoid strenuous activity, and seriously consider just staying indoors altogether.
Wow. So it's like a snow day, but for bad air.
That's a good way to put it.
Okay, so hunker down,
Yeah.
wait for the all clear. So the big takeaway here is that this AQI number isn't just a number. It's information that can help us make informed decisions about our health.
Right. It's about taking control
It's about knowing what you're breathing.
and making choices to protect yourself.
Exactly. So we've talked about what AQI is, how it's calculated, why it matters, but what can our listeners actually do with this knowledge?
Well, now that you're armed with this awareness, the challenge is to incorporate it into your daily life.
Okay, so give us some practical tips. What can we do?
Well, for example, maybe check the AQI before you head out for a bike ride.
Okay, good one.
Or if you're planning a family picnic,
Right.
consider choosing a park that's in an area with better air quality.
So it's about being mindful of the air around us
Exactly.
and making choices accordingly.
And if you or someone in your family has respiratory issues, think about adjusting your outdoor activities on days when the AQI is high.
Right. Maybe opt for an indoor workout instead.
Good idea.
Or choose a less strenuous activity.
And we talked about air purifiers before. Those can be a real game changer.
Especially for people who are sensitive to air pollution.
Absolutely.
Right? It creates that clean air bubble in your home.
Exactly.
And even simple things like carpooling or taking public transportation on days with high AQI can help.
Every little bit counts.
It all adds up.
It really does.
So it's not just about individual actions, it's about collective action.
Exactly. The more people who are aware of EQI and taking steps to protect themselves, the better it is for everyone.
Right, because we all breathe the same air.
We do.
Well, I don't know about you, but I'm feeling a lot more empowered after this deep dive.
Me too. It's amazing how much we can learn from one little number
It really is.
and how much power we have to make a difference.
Exactly. So thank you for joining us for this deep dive into AQI.
It was my pleasure.
Until next time, stay curious and breathe well.
Bye, everyone.